Episode 4 Short Stories of Bravery. Chapter 23 The Man Who Roamed the Woods. Chad Rogers had the rising suspicion that Heslick was trying to see his demise. The feeling boiled in his stomach, fermenting, gnawing at his mind for weeks ever since he'd finished his mission in Manchester. It had been a death mission, he was sure. Heslick had sent him, his personal agent of investigation, the feared Lion's Foot, into the heart of danger. A software engineer and ally of the Empire, a surveyor of Kidin and Copper Powers, was in trouble with the Argolls. Lion's Foot had a reputation. He was an agent of Bo-Keden's before rising in his rank. His work was good initially. His skill as a Radic had startled his foes. Nobody had fought a Radic in so long. He tore through his enemies, catching all off guard. Those who survived to crawl back to their bosses spread the word of a surveyor in shining bronze who struck with the power of his heavy chain. His connection to the earth also granted more subtle skills. Nobody had seen a Radic in action for many years. Nobody would know that he could hear conversations through the floor from half a mile away. Even when word of him spread, it would not help those who stood in Heslick's path. To be faced with Lion's Foot, to have the hulking mass of earth-flinging Seneva find you in the night, was not only to be an enemy of the Empire, but a personal enemy of the Far Heslick himself. Still, all of the rumours in the world, all of the intelligence he could gather from afar, all of the fear he could instill, would not help him against the wave he faced in Manchester. The Argolls weren't more numerous than he could handle, but they were too well placed. They knew the exits and entrances of the building. They knew where to trap him. They knew how he would fight. Chad was an intelligence officer. He did not think it unreasonable that they'd done their research, and he knew it would be thorough. But to corner him so perfectly, to expect his entrance just at the right time, no, they'd had to have had an Empire source. As he stood on the third floor of an office, no earth around him, witnessing the left leg of his Alice sheared off from the knee by a great flaming hatchet, he knew he'd been set up to it. More condemning, Heslick had been surprised to see Chad return. A hint of frustration came to his voice at the thought that his loyal ally, the software engineer, had survived the attack. The Lion's Foot in Chad could read the man. He had a plan, Chad realized, using his Seneva connections to read the man's expression through his helmet. Heslick was composed, but like all men, he would shake more when anxious. Chad could feel it through the earth. He needed me and the engineer dead, and he needed it to look like an accident. Heslick had been quick then to send Chad to Melbourne, to keep him busy gathering information. Heslick had repaired the leg of Chad's Alice, Ferrad, using his new limb technology. When Chad reached the airport in Melbourne, he found himself consumed by thoughts of betrayal. He thought back to when he had first found Heslick. How different his life had been then. He'd just turned 17, having completed 6 months of hiking through the wilderness from his small hometown in Oregon to the rail yard in Santa Fe. The reason for his departure was brash but necessary. He'd grown up in a town in the center of Oregon, nothing more than a strip of shops sandwiched between a lake, a forest, and a mountain. The valley of his hometown was lush, and through it ran a creek which took the mountain sleet to the wide lake and the quarry. His best friend growing up was a girl named Stacy. She was sweet and cared for him deeply. Her father, the sheriff of the town, loomed over her like a thick shadow. When they played, the sheriff would always watch in the distance, disapproving. He remembered the day which marked the turning point in their relationship. They played by the creek on a freezing day of early spring. Chunks of brown and grey ice churned in a flurry of the storming waters. The thickly scrubbed embankments crumbled underneath Chad as they played, and he fell in. A log burst from under the ice and delivered a dazzling uppercut to his jaw. When he awoke, the shadow of Stacy's father, Mr. Johnson, loomed over him. Gun in hand, he blocked the sun, but he had saved him. Stacy became popular, Chad did not, and as the seed of constant attention rotted at the empathy of her brain, their relationship fell apart. She was friends with his tormentors and did not stop them, specifically Jimmy Nevis, from delivering their punishment to him. This made it even more surprising when Chad, the unpopular football lineman, got her invite to prom in junior year. He accepted the offer straight away, but was nervous. Had she changed now? The night came and he strode over the creek, through the dense twilight woods to her house. Both of their houses backed onto the forest, and through the thick woods was the fastest route between them. Chad clambered his way over the low stone wall and made his way around her pool onto her deck, and to her back door. Chad wore his finest suit of charcoal grey with an electric blue tie. Butterflies jittered in his stomach, but he found the confidence and composure to knock. The door opened, and she stood there in her electric blue dress, absolutely beautiful. Every day which had allowed himself to be smitten by her, despite her ignorance of him, had led to this. He approached the door, ready to hug her hello, when foreign hands grabbed her by the waist. Jimmy Nevis, from inside, was waiting. He held her in a full embrace, and they kissed passionately right there in front of him. Butterflies turned to lead in Chad's stomach. Joy sated to incomprehension. He caught her glance and saw her malicious joy in the situation. Happiness, evil happiness, burned in her eyes. Hands grabbed Chad. He usually could not be snuck upon when on the ground, but he was on a wooden deck, and they hoisted him. 3 sets, 3 boys swung him into the air. Jimmy pulled out a camera. A pile of dog shit, a massive puddle of mud, piss, spit, maybe? Chad thought as he fell, sure that he was about to be launched into the most embarrassing situation of his life. All pretense of disappointment and heartbreak was suspended as his body tumbled. He fell past the floor. He fell through the ground and then felt a cold embrace. Back first in his finest suit, with his hair done, he was consumed by the icy pool of water. Like a stone, he sank. Chad couldn't swim in the best of times. His mind fell into disarray, trying to contort his limbs to paddle upwards. The water numbed him wholly. The jacket constricted him boundlessly. His arms could be no use here. Nobody came to help him. No air was in his lungs to lift him. He pushed off the ground, and found that hands held him under the surface now. The lead of despair in his stomach, he found, was not lead at all. It was a pit of charcoals who now had a match struck to them. The intense fire of rage boiled in his guts. Water ran hot off his skin. His eyes shot red. His mind wandered past survival, past the need to stay alive, and into the need to inflict revenge. Chad was broken, and they would all be sorry. He leaped off the bottom of the pool and reached for the hands of those who held him down. He clawed at them, kicked off the wall, and dragged the boys in. He flailed off them, using their bodies as a solid platform to lift himself into the air and breathe. He sucked in a breath. The air was cold and fresh. A foot soared past him, just as he comprehended the world, and kicked him straight in the head. Fire came to soothe the pain, and he felt nothing. He grinned. His fingers slipped into the earth, and he felt that connection he'd always had. The ground was powerful. When he was away from it, he was weak, but with it at his fingertips, he was in an infinite position to fight for his freedom. He tore himself from the cold water and rolled over the earth. Another boot hit him, but he tossed the feeling aside and stood tall against the boys. The earth was at his fingertips still. In his state of pure, molten emotion, having its hot lava slosh through his systems, he felt the first inkling of his place in the world. Jimmy lined up a punch. Chad gripped at the dirt, not touching it, but feeling as if the power of the grab was in his palm, and heaved upwards. A clumsy shaft of earth shot up and reamed the boy in the stomach. He doubled over and slumped backwards. Behind Chad, the 2 boys in the pool clawed at the edge. Their eyes spat fire, their limbs tossing themselves onto dry land, ready to drown Chad. Chad yanked at the earth again and gave it motion. Clumps of wet clay smashed each boy in the face. They were projected into the pool. Blood spurted from one of the boys' noses. Stacy stood, horrified, Jimmy's camera in her hand, and backed herself against the outside wall of her house. Her maniacal triumph had been replaced by fear. She backed herself up, her left hand palming for the open door. Chad, drunk on his own power, did not care. The earth was at his command, just like he felt it always should have been. He raised a pillar of earth by her feet. It rose up to her neck, cupping it and lifting her up by it. She struggled for breath and clawed at the pillar. He was breathing heavily, both gasping for air and growling at the same time. His brain buzzed, too hyped on adrenaline, too obsessed with pure rage and revenge to think of words. All that came to him were concepts, deception, hatred, embarrassment, depression, her smug attitude, being taken advantage of. There weren't any possible sentences he could put together to describe the culmination of his feelings. Stacy's skin turned blue, her throat rasped, her hands clawed like a trapped mouse. Her neck was being crushed against the wall, and when Chad checked, his hand was still commanding the dirt to do it. He took a moment to look around. A section of the pool had been stained pink from a boy's broken nose. Jimmy had doubled over himself, not in any state to stand up and fight. Another boy flopped onto the side of the pool, content with simple existence. Chad heard a car screech on the dusty track into Stacy's driveway, on the other side of the house. Horror rocked his body. He'd assaulted 4 people today with no witnesses to defend that they had almost drowned him, and that it was in self-defense. Even then, he understood that this was revenge, not self-defense. The lava of his stomach diffused into his veins. Hot fear flushed his head. Images of his future imprisoned swam into his mind's eye. Chad kicked the pillar of earth, which held Stacy to the wall by her neck. She collapsed onto the floor and heaved for breath. "You lost me today," he said, as if it meant anything to her. He wanted to help her, but they were both past that now. "You lost the only person who cared about you." He heard Stacy's father's footsteps as they disembarked from his vehicle. There was no way Chad could explain himself out of this one. There was no way that this story wouldn't spread regardless. In such a religious town full of good, God-fearing Christian families, he'd be burned at the stake if it was legal. He commanded dirt with his fingertips. He looked at them, puzzled. This, whatever he had done, which he hadn't for a second comprehended or understood, was some serious witchcraft. There was only one option for him. Chad sprinted into the forest, and he never looked back. The memory was painful for him, but that was why he left. He had discovered who he was. Lost, scared, and on the cusp of taking his own life a week later, he met a man who truly saved him. An old man, a lictus named Vasily Dimos, from the city of Sparta. He was the man who took Chad to Heslick. They walked from Oregon to Santa Fe, through the harsh wilderness. Vasily taught Chad how to be one with the land and the earth by trekking him barefoot across it. He taught Chad of the soul and spirituality and of his place in the cosmos. He taught Chad how to draw his shath, his Seneva weapon, a gleaming silver battle axe. On their journey, they were welcomed into native reservations, where Chad learned of the native Seneva and their understanding of the soul. The ancient man, Vasily, left him outside an old engine shed, waiting for an answer by the door. Vasily's last words to him were held fondly.
"Take with you the knowledge of the earth, strong, willful, and deceptive. Rock depends, but it is not dependent. Rock is strong, but it is not defined by its strength. Rock is great, but only by commanding greatness. Go into this world like the ground you control."
Moments later, he met Heslick and Bokeeden. Heslick beamed at the sight of him. Chad told his story, a fake but close enough story with a fake name, as instructed by Vasily. Heslick leaped at the opportunity to tell Chad that his empire was for Seneva like themselves, those who discovered powers beyond their comprehension and needed somewhere to turn, somewhere to be safe without judgment. Chad adored the idea. He thought Heslick fabulous for making it a reality. Heslick was keen on him too, and assigned him to Bokeeden to be an investigatory agent under the name Lion's Foot. Chad cringed at the memory as he made his way to the Melbourne base of operations. "Heslick is trying to kill me." He couldn't understand why, and although his evidence was circumstantial at best, he'd done some further research of his own. Heslick's personal operatives didn't last more than 4 months, usually. Heslick made sure they disappeared without a trail. Chad had lasted 1.5 years as Lion's Foot. He was well beyond the usual expiry date. He shuddered. Chad's next clue was the damning mission he'd received. He played it again as he rolled up to the gates of the factory on his steel horse. The bike purred beneath his legs, rumbling as a beast. He put his headphones in. "Lion's Foot, this is your mission." Heslick's voice crackled through the half-dead earphone from the little black device, the one which Chad had handed to me to use as a clock. "Ms. Umbrella will deal with the Argols and assist Festus. Festus has been made aware of their arrangement. Your mission is of far greater importance to the success of the Empire. Keep this classified, as always. The great gathering of our nation is in the near future. To convince all Seneva of our nation's purpose and importance, we will need to have actions beyond our manifesto to Seneva. There are stories, cornerstones of Western Seneva history, about the 3 legendary Seneva of teleportation, time, and gravity. In my library of Seneva texts in Vestas' office in Melbourne, you will find books on them and how to find them. Whether you personally believe in the stories is irrelevant. You will find them. Not, however, without help. I have located 3 Seneva in Melbourne who will help you to form a diverse fighting team. They are Makey, the only discovered Keen of recent, Zamel of Well, from the formidable Menace family, and Genevieve of Iver, a girl of the Blue Flame. Find these Seneva Lion's Foot, and with them, locate the Nefaritsos. That is your mission. It was a ridiculous mission, he realized. He'd been given nothing more than the location of Heslick's library and a lab, and yet was tasked with finding 3 specific Seneva in the whole city. Beyond that, they then had to find 3 specific Seneva across the whole globe, who may or may not exist with absolutely no clues as to their whereabouts. It was a goose chase. He knew he was being played. Festus was all too happy to see Chad when he arrived. Festus was a smart man. He was also an idiot, Chad discerned. Festus' over-the-top fake enthusiasm for Lion's Foot couldn't be missed, even without feeling the Seneva's anxiety through the ground. Vestas set Chad to task immediately, pairing him with Ms. Umbrella, an operative with whom he'd worked many times. They were to spy on some small-time Argols. Vestas was quick to make a phone call after handing Chad his mission, outside in the car park, for privacy. Chad delayed putting his things away to spy on the scientist. Chad hid behind the forklift next to the roller door. It was the only cover between him and Vestas. He wouldn't need to see Vestas, however, to eavesdrop. Instead, he tore off his shoes and mashed his bare palms and soles into the asphalt. It was the height of summer heat. His skin screamed at him on the road, but he subdued the pain. He listened. "He's arrived," Vestas said into the phone. The clacks of his metal heels, though, blasted into the asphalt atop his voice. Luckily for Chad, listening with hands was different than listening with ears. The loud sounds were not jarring, they just covered up the soft ones. "Yes," Vestas answered. "And I'd like you to tell me what you have in mind with him, Heslick." Vestas seemed stressed. Chad had missed Heslick's opener. He concentrated harder until he could just hear Heslick's voice through the ground. "He's a good agent, Vestas. He's the best I've had," Heslick told him. Chad stiffened up, surprised. "He lasted well beyond what I expected. Most agents get shut down early on when they're eventually captured. Not this one." "Yes," Vestas said impatiently, "but that doesn't outline why you sent him here, to me. I need you to eliminate his thread." Heslick cut the scientist off. Chad's eyes bulged. He tried not to gasp. "Heslick," Vestas trailed, "I appreciate the offer to have a test subject, but your personal agent?" "He knows too much, Vestas," Heslick said. "They all get to know too much eventually. They talk with our goals. They eavesdrop on conspirators and traitors. After a while, my agents can't be trusted. He's not jaded like the others, but he soon will be. It's a demanding job. He did it well, but now he must be stopped before he intervenes with our plans." "Right," Vestas sighed. "Well, I understand that, but don't you think it imprudent to send a potential conspirator into Argold-controlled Melbourne?" "Not at all," Heslick said. "The Argols cut off his leg. I know he hates them. He will help you bring all of the big players in. He'll be very effective at it. But," Heslick warned, anticipating Vestas' response, "if you even get the hint of betrayal from him, you eliminate his thread. Is that understood?" It's quite understood, Minifara," Vestas noted. "But do leave him be until I visit. I'm going to be running a recruitment and community survey soon. I'd like to see him in action one last time." "Sure thing," Vestas said. He was nervous now. Chad could feel it through the ground. He could also feel his own heart, drowning out all else in his rage and disappointment. He'd been had. He'd done the man's dirty work for 1.5 years, and now his payment would be thread removal, rather than his likely numerous planned deaths. It was obscene. No, Heslick could not get away with this, Chad decided. The Empire was good, and it stood for promising ideals, but Heslick was immoral, mad even. He couldn't win. Chad would stop him. He turned to the device in his pocket, with Heslick's instructions. The mission might have been a goose chase, but it outlined Heslick's demise if done against him. Find the Seneva, find the legendaries, and use them to revolt against the leader. If Heslick believed that people would follow the legendaries, then surely it was true. Ferid, as Lion's Foot, did his work, wrangling Argols alongside Ms. Umbrella, as Vestas had prescribed. In his free time, Chad snuck through the compound library, trying to find texts about legendaries, but his search wasn't very fruitful. Even the most mundane aspect of the mission was a goose chase. Soon, after Heslick and Bokeeden came to town, Chad disregarded Vestas' missions, instead choosing to follow the Farah and Faraku in their recruitment tasks. He huddled down by the foundations of Mr. Finnick's old house the day I had been sitting inside on the couch with them. "Makey," Chad heard Heslick address me, the first of the Seneva on the list. Heslick was already gathering the group. It could be too late to act. Still, if Chad was seen out of line this early on, Vestas would have his thread. He had to stay quiet. But he did follow me home. He followed me to school the next day too, where he happened upon a Seneva which he could track. Their wide orange trail, like a richly decorated boulevard to the thread, was a welcome sensation to him. Chad could now follow us more easily and monitor us. The new orange trail, combined with the frail sensation of my Seneva abilities, led Chad to Finnick's house a second time, when Natalie discovered her identity, and to David's house on the night of our date. Once he caught the name of Geneve, he knew that he'd struck gold. Chad had found Makey, Zamel, and Geneve. He didn't believe in destiny particularly. It did not call to him. But he had found us, and that was enough. He left a note for us, which we would never see. News of the reappearance of Eva Argol spread like wildfire through the compound. Ms. Umbrella told of how the girl claimed not to be the Argol daughter, and how it was a blatant lie. After Miss Umbrella lost her powers, Chad was recruited to chase the supposed Argol daughter. Instead, he chose to ignore the mission. He tracked us during those days to check that we were safe, not yet choosing to openly betray Vestus, but stumbled upon Vestus' ambush party. He would have been called in on such a mission, but was missing from the scene. Vestus would be suspicious of him now, which meant that he was on limited time. Chad helped at the battle after I'd collapsed, acting from a distance, shifting mud to favour Zamel and Genevieve. Then he made his story to Vestus that he'd gone interrogating local Argols to see if the stories of Eva Argol were true. Vestus bought the lie, but it would only be a matter of time. Chad needed to ditch soon, to come to us, but he still didn't have the book he needed to find. Unfortunately, we came to him first. Chad was caught between two forces. If he explicitly helped us in our battle to escape, Vestus would know that he was sabotaging the mission, and he couldn't keep looking for clues in the library. If, however, he caught only one of us, the rest would come back, and he would have one last chance to get the clue Heslick wanted him to find. He captured me and bided his time. Chad found his information in the library, a single innocuous paragraph of text with a picture, amongst a whole wall of books. The time was right. Zamel and Genevieve returned to rescue me. Zamel was captured, but without the three of us present, he couldn't give up his guys in front of Vestus, not if he wanted to make it out of that room with his thread. In the last second, the moment he was preparing to act and save Zamel, Genevieve and I broke through the door. He chased us, following commands. If he helped us even then, we would all have to run, and Vestas' crew would still give chase. He played his cards as an agent and chose to keep his guys to eliminate every thread in the room, a strategy which proved effective at getting us out to safety, but which didn't prove his trustworthiness. "So there's a Great Seneva gathering then? And it's actually happening?" I asked him. "There should be," he said. He smiled whenever he spoke, as if he had nothing to be sad about. This confused me. "Do you know about Heslick's big plan for this gathering?" I asked, and looked to Celeste and Natalie. The cogs turned in their heads, and their eyes fell wide open. "Why are you all looking like that?" he asked. "What do you know?" "Heslick is going to remove all of the threads at that gathering," I said. "What?" Chad gasped. "I saw it in a vision. He's having Vestus build some giant electrical transmitter. Vestus thinks it's free energy, but he's going to put the thread removal equation into it and cut all of the threads at once." Chad's eyes narrowed. His breath was hard and scornful. The ground shifted under my ass. "He has the technology for it," he said after a pause. "Right now, I wouldn't put anything past him, but did you catch why? He can't fix the Seneva's problems. He doesn't think his society will work." "That's cowardly," Chad huffed. "I believed in his empire. I still do. It would work." "Not everybody holds that view," Celeste said. "There's opposition, and Heslick certainly isn't doing himself any favors by hiring agents and having underground information rings." "Your story's fine, Chad," Natalie added, jumping over Celeste's sentiment. "But it's too perfect. How do we know that you abandoned Heslick? How do we know that you're not just doing as he told you right now? I don't trust Vestus or Heslick's words that you're a deserter." "I guess you don't know," Chad replied. "You'll just need to trust me on that. I hope that you can trust me, although the mechanical Seneva leg should give me some points, right?" Natalie hummed, her arms crossed. "Maybe if you'd saved us before you defeated us, I'd be more forgiving," she said, and turned away. Chad frowned in his disappointment, like a puppy who was rejected by a toddler. It was a look of genuine disappointment in his failure to please. I smiled at the face, like you would to a sad puppy. He smiled back. "So, mate," his eyes lit up at my use of the phrase. "When did you say this gathering was?" "Next June, although I don't know where or when." "A year and a half to gather the three legendaries. I mean, that can't be that hard, right?" I smiled. Celeste did not share my optimism. "The mythical gems," she said. "More than half of Seneva do not believe they exist. I don't even see why they're important. You said it yourself, Chad. You've been fooled into finding them." "I believe that we'll find them," Chad smiled. "This might be the only time in my life that I've felt the push of destiny, and maybe that means something." "But why should we care about them?" Celeste asked again. "Because if Heslick can prove that figures of myth live among us, if destiny can guide him to find three Senevas so hidden that their existence is refuted, he must be one of the most powerful destined Seneva on Earth. That would make him the destined leader." "So finding them first would give us legitimacy over him then?" I asked. "Absolutely," Chad nodded. "Although there's more to it that I've found. They're influential beyond the fact of their existence. I've got a stolen scripture which outlines it all." "I don't know. This plan depends on people being swayed by impressive acts of destiny, Celeste huffed, continuing through my hurry. Weirdly, I think that gives it some merit, Natalie chimed in, finally. She turned into the circle. It's being suggested by a past loyalist to Heslick, and somebody who believed in the Empire. If your story is true, Chad, and if the legendaries would sway you, then it's all we need, really. We only need to turn Heslick's supporters away from him. Chad beamed to Natalie's approval, struggling to keep his cheeks from shining rosy. Natalie was still unimpressed with the whole situation. Her arms remained tightly crossed. We'd better get to work then, I said. We've got to beat Heslick to them to make this happen.